They said he was heartless. They said the Duke of Ashworth had ice in his veins. But that night, under the golden chandeliers of the Christmas ball, the truth was far more devastating. He danced with the heiresses. He danced with the beauties. He even danced with the woman who vowed to ruin him. But there was one woman standing in the shadows, the only woman he truly loved, that he wouldn't even look at. Why? Because looking at her might get her killed. This is the story of Sebastian Thorne and Bella Whitmore, a tale of forbidden passion, a stolen inheritance, and a Christmas betrayal that shocked all of London. You won't believe how this ends. The snow had been falling over Derbyshire for 3 days, blanketing the sprawling estate of Ashworth Manor in a silence that felt less like peace and more like a suffocation. Inside the great stone walls, however, the silence was shattered by the frantic preparations for the most anticipated event of the 1894 social season, the Ashworth Christmas Ball. Bella Whitmore stood by the frosted window of the third-floor nursery, pressing her hand against the cold glass. From here, she could see the carriages arriving, a relentless stream of black lacquer and gold crests, delivering the crème de la crème of British society to the front steps. They were wrapped in furs and velvet, laughing, oblivious to the bitter wind. Bella adjusted the cuffs of her modest grey wool dress. She was not one of them. Not anymore. Stop daydreaming, girl. The Duke expects the ribbons in the gallery to be perfectly straight. The sharp voice belonged to Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, a woman who wore her keys like a weapon. Bella turned, lowering her eyes respectfully. I was just finishing the hem on Lady Eleanor's gown, Mrs. Gable. I'll go to the gallery immediately. See that you do. And try to stay out of sight tonight, Bella. No one wants to be reminded of unfortunate circumstances during a celebration. Bella swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes, ma'am. 5 years ago, Bella Whitmore had been a debutante. She had been the daughter of Sir Thomas Whitmore, a man respected in Parliament. She had walked these same halls not as a servant, but as a guest. She had laughed in the rose garden with the young heir, Sebastian Thorne. But that was before the scandal, before her father was accused of embezzling funds from the Crown, a lie manufactured by enemies he never saw coming, before he took his own life in shame, leaving Bella penniless and branded the daughter of a thief. Now, at 23, she was a companion, a polite term for a glorified servant, to the Dowager Duchess, Sebastian's agonizingly critical aunt. And Sebastian was now the Duke of Ashworth, the most powerful, brooding and sought-after bachelor in England. She hurried down the servants' stairs, her heart hammering a traitorous rhythm against her ribs. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself that the boy who used to sneak lemon tarts to her in the library was gone, replaced by a cold, unyielding stranger. But when she reached the long gallery, she froze. He was there. Sebastian Thorne stood by the fireplace, inspecting a ledger with his steward. He was taller than she remembered, his shoulders broader, filling out his black evening coat with an intimidating grace. His dark hair was swept back, severe, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the scar just above his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a duel everyone whispered about, but no one dared mention. He looked up. For a second, time seemed to fracture. His eyes, the color of stormy seas, locked onto hers across the expanse of the room. Bella felt the air leave her lungs. The connection was electric, visceral, pulling at a tether that had never truly snapped despite 5 years of silence. She saw his hand tighten on the ledger, his knuckles turning white. He took a step toward her, his expression shifting from cold command to something raw, something desperate. "Bella," he breathed, his voice low but carrying in the vast, empty hall. Before she could answer, before she could even curtsy, the double doors at the far end burst open. "Sebastian, there you are!" Lady Genevieve Stirling swept into the room, a vision in crimson silk. She was the daughter of a marquis, wealthy, beautiful, and possessing a heart as black as coal. She moved directly to Sebastian's side, sliding her arm through his with possessive familiarity. "The guests are asking for you," Genevieve purred, casting a disdainful glance at Bella. "Oh, I didn't realize we were entertaining the help." Sebastian's jaw tightened. The raw emotion vanished from his face, replaced by an impassive mask of granite. He didn't look at Bella again. He looked down at Genevieve, forcing a tight smile. "My apologies, Genevieve. I was just addressing a staffing issue. It is resolved." A staffing issue. The words cut Bella deeper than any knife. She curtsied low, her face burning. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace. I will leave you." She turned and fled, not seeing the way Sebastian's eyes followed her, filled with a tormented agony that would have brought a lesser man to his knees. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of color and light. 3,000 candles flickered in the crystal chandeliers, reflecting off the diamond chokers of the duchesses and the gold epaulets of the officers. The orchestra played a lively quadrille, the music swelling to fill the cavernous space. Bella had not intended to attend. However, the Dowager Duchess, Lady Beatrice, was feeling unwell and demanded Bella sit behind her chair in the alcove to fetch her smelling salts and adjust her shawl. It was a cruel punishment. To be in the room, yet invisible. To be present, yet excluded. Bella wore her only good dress, a deep navy velvet that had belonged to her mother. She had updated the cut herself, lowering the neckline slightly to suit the modern fashion, but it was starkly simple compared to the beaded, feathered confections swirling around the dance floor. From her vantage point, she watched him. Sebastian was the sun around which the entire room orbited. Every father wanted to introduce his daughter. Every woman wanted to catch his eye. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, polite but distant. "He looks magnificent, doesn't he?" Lady Beatrice croaked, clutching her cane. A true Ashworth, unlike his father, who had too much heart and not enough head. "He is very commanding," Bella murmured, keeping her eyes on her hands. "Commanding? He is a king in all but name," Beatrice snapped. "And tonight he must choose a duchess. It is time. The estate needs an heir, and Genevieve Stirling has the connections we need to secure the northern rail lines." Bella felt a cold pit open in her stomach. A marriage of convenience? Of course. The music changed to a waltz. This was the moment. The first waltz of the evening was significant. Whoever the Duke chose to dance with would be seen as the favorite. The room went silent as Sebastian stepped onto the floor. He looked around the circle of expectant faces. His gaze swept over the crowd. For a heartbeat, his eyes lifted to the alcove where Bella sat in the shadows. Her breath hitched. "Ask me," her heart whispered. A foolish, dangerous wish. "Just once. Defy them all and ask me." His gaze held hers. She saw a flicker of conflict, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Then he looked away. He walked past the radiant Lady Emily Vane. He walked past the wealthy American heiress, Miss Carter. He stopped in front of Lady Genevieve Stirling. "May I?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth. Genevieve beamed, her triumph radiating like heat. "You may, Your Grace." As they swept onto the floor, the crowd murmured in approval. They were a perfect match on paper, power and prestige. Bella watched them spin, Genevieve's crimson dress flaring out like a bloodstain against Sebastian's black attire. He danced perfectly. He dipped her at the right moments. He steered her clear of the other couples. But Bella knew him. She knew the way he held his shoulders when he was tense. She knew the way his eyes became flat when he was bored or angry. He was dancing with Genevieve, but he wasn't with her. Yet, to the room, it was a debellation. The night wore on and the torture continued. Sebastian danced with the mayor's daughter. He danced with the French ambassador's wife. He danced with every eligible woman of high standing. He even danced with Lady Beatrice's elderly friend, Mrs. Halloway, earning a round of applause for his chivalry. He danced with everyone. Everyone except Bella. She remained in the alcove, a ghost at the feast. She fetched lemonade. She picked up dropped fans. She endured the whispers of the other servants who snickered at her fallen station. Around midnight, the heat of the room became unbearable. Lady Beatrice had fallen asleep in her chair. Bella seized the opportunity. She needed air. She needed to escape the sight of Sebastian, smiling down at Genevieve, who was now clinging to his arm as if she had already been fitted for the ducal coronet. Bella slipped out through the French doors onto the terrace. The cold air hit her like a slap, sharp and cleansing. The snow had stopped, leaving the gardens bathed in a silvery moonlight. She walked to the stone railing, gripping the icy balustrade, fighting back tears. She would not cry. She was a Whitmore. She had survived poverty. She had survived disgrace. She would survive a broken heart. "You'll catch your death out here without a cloak." The voice was deep, familiar, and right behind her. Bella spun around. Sebastian was standing in the shadows of the doorway, a lit cigar in his hand. The orange ember glowed, illuminating the rugged lines of his face. "Your Grace," she whispered, curtsying instinctively. "I didn't know you were there." "Drop the title, Bella," he said roughly, tossing the cigar into the snow and stepping toward her. "For God's sake, it's me." "Is it?" Bella challenged, her pain making her bold. The Sebastian I knew wouldn't have looked through me as if I were a piece of furniture for 3 hours. He flinched. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could smell the brandy and sandalwood on him. "I did what I had to do." "You humiliated me," she said, her voice shaking. "You danced with Mrs. Halloway. You danced with strangers. But you couldn't spare one moment for your oldest friend." "Friend?" He let out a dark, bitter laugh. "Is that what you think we are? Friends?" He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He loomed over her, his presence overwhelming. "Do you think it was easy? Watching you in that corner, looking so beautiful it made my chest ache, and forcing myself to turn away? Do you think I wanted to hold that viper, Genevieve, when all I wanted was you?" Bella stared at him, stunned. "Then why? Why did you ignore me?" Sebastian reached out, his gloved hand hovering near her face before he pulled it back, as if touching her were forbidden. "Because, Bella," he whispered, his voice laced with dread, "there is a man at this ball tonight who intends to kill the woman I love. And I need him to believe that woman is Genevieve Sterling." Bella froze, the winter wind suddenly feeling insignificant compared to the chill that ran down her spine. "Kill? Sebastian, what are you talking about?" He grabbed her upper arms, pulling her into the deeper shadows of a stone pillar, away from the prying eyes of the ballroom windows. His grip was firm, urgent. "3 days ago, I received a letter," Sebastian hissed. "It was from a man named Silas Thorne. My cousin. The one who was disinherited 20 years ago." "I thought he was dead," Bella gasped. "He died in the colonies." "So did we all. But he's alive, and he believes the dukedom is rightfully his. He knows he can't kill me. If I die without an heir, The title goes to the crown, not him. He wants to make me suffer. He wants to destroy my legacy. The letter was specific, Bella. He said he would take the future Duchess from me on the night of the Christmas ball. Bella's mind raced. So, by courting Genevieve publicly, by dancing with everyone but you, I am painting a target on her back and taking it off yours, Sebastian said, his eyes burning with intensity. I have guards watching Genevieve. I have men stationed at every exit. We will catch him when he makes his move, but I could not risk him thinking you mattered to me. If he knew that you are the only thing in this world I give a damn about, you would be dead already. Tears pricked Bella's eyes, hot and fast. The cruelty of the evening, the cold shoulder, the snub. It had all been an act of protection, a desperate, twisted act of love. You should have told me, she whispered. I couldn't risk it. You're a terrible liar, Bella. He offered a small, sad smile. If you knew, you would have looked at me with fear. You would have looked around the room. Silas is here, somewhere. He's watching. I needed your pain to be real, so his assumption would be real. And Genevieve, does she know she is bait? Sebastian's expression hardened. Genevieve is part of this scheme, though she doesn't know it. Her father, Lord Sterling, has been selling secrets about my shipping lanes to the French. Silas is using Sterling. By putting Genevieve in the spotlight, I flush out both the assassin and the traitor. It was a complex, dangerous web, and Bella was standing in the center of it. She looked up at him, seeing the exhaustion etched around his eyes. He was carrying the weight of the world, playing a game of chess with human lives. So what happens now? She asked. Now, Sebastian said, glancing back at the ballroom. I go back in there and propose a toast to Lady Genevieve. I trigger the trap. And you go to your room, you lock the door. You do not come out until I come for you. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers for a fleeting second. Please, Bella, trust me. Just for tonight. I trust you, she breathed. He pulled away, straightening his coat, the mask of the cold Duke sliding back into place. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. Bella? Yes? Save the last waltz for me, even if we have to dance it in an empty room without music. With that, he disappeared back into the golden light of the ballroom. Bella stood alone on the terrace, her heart racing. She intended to obey him. She truly did. She turned toward the servants' entrance, ready to flee to the safety of the nursery. But then, she heard it. A low voice, coming from the garden below the terrace. The plan has changed. The Duke knows. Bella crouched down, peering through the stone balusters. 2 men were standing in the snow, obscured by the hedge maze. One was tall and thin, Silas, perhaps. The other wore the livery of a footman. He's guarding the Sterling girl, the tall man said, his voice like grinding glass. Smart lad. But he made a mistake. What mistake? The footman asked. He met the governess on the terrace. I saw them. I saw the way he looked at her. He isn't protecting Sterling. He's using her as a shield for the little mouse. Bella's blood ran cold. He saw us. So, do we take the Sterling girl? No, the man said, pulling a long, thin dagger from his coat. We take the mouse. We take Bella Whitmore. If we have her, the Duke will sign over the estate before sunrise. Where is she going? She's heading to the servants' quarters. Intercept her in the library corridor. Don't kill her yet. I want her screaming when Sebastian finds us. The men split up, moving silently into the house. Bella scrambled back from the railing, her hand covering her mouth to stifle a scream. The plan had failed. Sebastian's act hadn't been good enough. They were coming for her, and if they caught her, They would use her to destroy Sebastian. She couldn't go to her room. That was where they were going. She couldn't go to the ballroom. She would never reach Sebastian through the crowd before they grabbed her. She needed a weapon. She needed help. She needed to get to the library. In the library, hidden inside an old, hollowed-out globe, was her father's old service revolver. Sebastian had hidden it there years ago, when they were children playing pirates. If it was still there, she stood a chance. Bella gathered her skirts and ran, not toward safety, but into the dark heart of the manor, knowing that the hunters were already closing in. Bella ran. She abandoned the quiet, gliding walk she had perfected as a companion and sprinted, her heels clicking frantically against the oak floorboards of the servants' corridor. The manor, usually a place of comfort, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows. Every creak of the settling house sounded like a footstep behind her. Every flicker of a gas lamp looked like the shadow of a killer. She bypassed the main staircase, ducking into the narrow passage that led behind the kitchens and up toward the West Wing library. Her breath came in ragged gasps, burning her throat. She could hear the muffled strains of the orchestra playing a lively polka downstairs, a sickeningly cheerful soundtrack to the terror gripping her chest. The library. Just get to the library. She burst through the service door into the library, nearly tripping over the hem of her velvet dress. The room was massive, smelling of beeswax, old leather and cigar smoke. It was lit only by the dying embers of the fireplace, casting long, dancing shadows across the rows of bookshelves. Bella didn't hesitate. She scrambled toward the far corner, where an antique globe on a mahogany stand sat near the window. It was a relic from Sebastian's grandfather, a massive thing depicting the world as it was in 1750. Her fingers scrabbled at the equator line. There was a hidden latch. Sebastian had shown it to her when she was 12, and he was 15. For emergencies, he had joked then, pretending to be a highwayman. Please, still be there. Please. She found the catch and pressed. The globe hissed, the northern hemisphere popping open on a hidden hinge. There, nestled in a velvet hollow, was the dull gleam of steel. The Webley Bulldog revolver. It was old, and the oil had likely dried, but it was heavy and cold in her hand. She checked the cylinder. 5 rounds. I didn't think you had it in you, Miss Whitmore. Bella spun around, raising the gun with trembling hands. Standing by the door she had just entered was the footman she had seen in the garden. He was a man named Finch, a new hire, she realized now. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, locking it. "Stay back," Bella warned, her voice cracking. "I know how to use this." Finch smirked, stepping into the firelight. He held a heavy brass poker he had plucked from the fireplace. "It's a heavy pull on that trigger, darling. You'll break your wrist before you hit me." He lunged. Bella squeezed the trigger. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The recoil jerked her arm violently, sending a shockwave up to her shoulder. She missed his chest, but the bullet grazed his upper arm, tearing through the livery coat. Finch roared in pain and rage. He didn't stop. He crashed into her, the momentum throwing them both against the heavy oak desk. The gun skittered out of Bella's hand, sliding across the floor and vanishing under a sofa. "You little witch!" Finch snarled, grabbing her by the hair. Bella screamed, clawing at his face. She wasn't fighting like a lady. She was fighting like a cornered animal. She drove her knee into his stomach, making him wheeze, but his grip was iron. He slammed her back against the edge of the desk, the wood digging into her spine. "Silas wants you alive," Finch panted, blood dripping from his arm onto the carpet. "But he didn't say pretty. I can break a few fingers before he gets here." He raised the brass poker. Bella squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow. Suddenly, the library door handles rattled violently. Someone was trying to get in. "Open this door!" A voice boomed. Not Sebastian's, but deep and unfamiliar. Finch froze, distracted. Bella seized the second. She grabbed a heavy crystal inkwell from the desk and smashed it into the side of Finch's head with every ounce of strength she possessed. The glass shattered. Ink exploded everywhere, black and thick like oil. Finch's eyes rolled back, and he crumbled to the floor, unconscious. Bella gasped, backing away, her chest heaving. She looked at the door. The rattling stopped. "Clever girl," a smooth voice said from the shadows of the other entrance, the main doors connecting to the gallery. Bella turned slowly. Silas Thorne stood there. He looked terrifyingly like Sebastian, but twisted. Where Sebastian was rugged, Silas was gaunt. Where Sebastian's eyes were stormy, Silas's were dead and flat. He held a long silver knife in one hand, playing with the blade. "You took down my hired help," Silas drawled, stepping over Finch's body. "Impressive. Sebastian always did have a taste for fiery women." Bella scanned the floor for the gun. It was too far. "Don't bother," Silas said, reading her mind. He moved with frightening speed, grabbing her wrist and twisting her arm behind her back. Bella cried out as he forced her toward the gallery doors. "Where are you taking me?" she sobbed, struggling uselessly against his grip. "To the ball, my dear," Silas whispered against her ear, the smell of stale tobacco clinging to him. "The family reunion is overdue, and I want an audience when I break my cousin's heart." The grand ballroom was reaching the height of its splendor. The orchestra had just finished a triumphant crescendo, and the guests were clapping politely. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne. In the center of the room, Sebastian Thorne, Duke of Ashworth, tapped a crystal spoon against his glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting silenced the crowd. He stood on the raised dais, Lady Genevieve Sterling by his side. She looked triumphant, a queen in waiting. Sebastian looked like a man walking to the gallows, his eyes scanning the perimeter, searching for the signal from his guards that the intruder had been caught. "My lords, ladies, and distinguished guests," Sebastian began, his voice steady but lacking its usual resonance. "Thank you for joining us at Ashworth Manor this Christmas. Tonight is a night of revelation." He paused. He had heard something. A dull thud from the floor above. A gunshot? The crowd waited, breathless. "Sebastian, the toast," Genevieve whispered impatiently, nudging his arm. Sebastian ignored her. His hand moved instinctively to the inside of his jacket, gripping the handle of the hidden pistol he was carrying. His eyes darted to the main double doors at the top of the grand staircase that overlooked the ballroom. "Your Grace?" Lord Sterling asked from the front row, looking nervous. Suddenly, the double doors at the top of the stairs burst open with a crash that echoed like thunder. The room gasped. 300 heads turned upward. Silas Thorne stood at the top of the velvet-carpeted staircase. He had his left arm wrapped tightly around Bella's neck, using her body as a human shield. In his right hand, the silver knife was pressed dangerously close to her jugular. Bella's hair was wild, ink stained her hands, and her dress was torn at the shoulder. She looked terrified, but her eyes found Sebastian's instantly. "Merry Christmas, cousin," Silas shouted, his voice ringing out over the stunned silence. "Silas," Sebastian breathed. The glass he was holding shattered in his hand, champagne and blood dripping onto the floor, but he didn't seem to notice. "My God, is that a ghost?" a duchess shrieked. A ripple of panic went through the crowd. Women fainted. Men reached for weapons they didn't have. "Nobody moves!" Silas roared, pressing the knife harder. A thin line of red appeared on Bella's white skin. "Or the girl dies before she hits the floor." Sebastian stepped off the dais, moving into the center of the empty dance floor. He held his hands up, palms open, showing he wasn't drawing his weapon yet. "Let her go, Silas," Sebastian said, his voice deadly calm, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a war drum. "This is between you and me." "Is it?" Silas sneered, descending the first step, dragging Bella with him. "You stole my birthright, Sebastian. You sit in my house, eat my food, spend my money. And now," he looked down at Genevieve, who was trembling by the dais, "now you plan to marry the daughter of a traitor to secure your power?" Lord Sterling turned pale. "He lies. The man is mad." "Am I?" Silas laughed maniacally. "Ask Sterling about the French shipping manifests, Sebastian. He sold you out. I just used the open door." Sebastian didn't look at Sterling. He didn't look at Genevieve. His entire world had narrowed down to the woman at the top of the stairs. "I don't care about the title," Sebastian said, his voice rising, raw and desperate. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the shipping lines. Take it. Take it all." The crowd murmured in shock. A duke abdicating? For a servant? "You're lying," Silas spat. "I am not," Sebastian shouted, stepping forward. "I hereby renounce the dukedom of Ashworth. I will sign the papers tonight. I will leave England. It is yours, Silas. The crown, the estate, the fortune, all of it." He fell to his knees in the center of the ballroom, a gesture of total submission that made the proud aristocracy gasp in horror. "Just let Bella go," Sebastian begged, tears finally spilling from his eyes. "She is innocent. She is nothing to this family. Please, take me instead." Bella sobbed, trying to shake her head. "No, Sebastian, don't." Silas paused. He looked at Sebastian, on his knees, stripped of his pride. It was the moment he had dreamed of for 20 years. But seeing it, seeing the absolute devotion in Sebastian's eyes, it didn't bring him satisfaction. It brought him rage. "You love her," Silas realized, his voice dripping with disgust. "You, a duke, in love with a penniless orphan. It's pathetic." "She is my life," Sebastian said simply. "Then watching you lose everything isn't enough," Silas snarled. His eyes went wide with madness. "I have to take the one thing you can't replace." He raised the knife, preparing to strike Bella. "No!" Sebastian screamed, scrambling for his gun. But before Silas could bring the blade down, a shot rang out. It didn't come from Sebastian. It came from the crowd. Silas jerked backward, his shoulder exploding in a spray of red. He howled, his grip on Bella loosening for a fraction of a second. Standing near the punch bowl, smoke curling from a small pearl-handled pistol, was Lady Beatrice, the Dowager Duchess. The old woman, usually unable to walk without a cane, stood tall, her face a mask of iron determination. "Not in my house, you bastard!" she spat. Bella didn't wait. She bit Silas's hand, hard. He screamed and dropped the knife. Bella threw herself forward, tumbling down the remaining stairs, just as Sebastian sprinted across the polished floor. Silas lunged for her again with his good arm, but Sebastian was there. He didn't use his gun. He tackled Silas with the force of a freight train. The two men crashed into the banister, rolling onto the floor in a tangle of limbs and fury. It wasn't a duel of gentlemen. It was a brawl. Sebastian punched Silas again and again, unleashing 5 years of repressed agony, fear, and anger. He hit him until Silas stopped fighting, until the guards finally rushed in to pull the Duke off the unconscious intruder. Sebastian scrambled backward, his chest heaving, his knuckles bloody. He didn't look at the guards. He turned wildly. "Bella!" She was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, shaking, holding her bleeding neck. He fell to his knees beside her, gathering her into his arms. He buried his face in her neck, weeping openly, indifferent to the 300 people watching them. "I've got you," he choked out, rocking her back and forth. "I've got you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Bella clung to his torn jacket, sobbing into his chest. "You were going to give it all up. You were going to give him the dukedom." Sebastian pulled back, framing her face with his bloodied hands. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time that night, the icy Duke of Ashworth was gone. There was only the man. "Bella," he said, his voice carrying in the silent ballroom, "I would burn this house to the ground before I let a single hair on your head be harmed. I love you. I have loved you since the day you threw a snowball at me when we were 10, and I will never, ever look away from you again." He kissed her. It wasn't a polite society kiss. It was desperate, messy, and consumed with relief. It was a kiss that sealed their fate and shattered every rule of the aristocracy. When they broke apart, the silence in the room was absolute. Then a slow, sarcastic clapping began. It was Lady Genevieve. She stood by the dais, looking at her father, Lord Stirling, who was being handcuffed by the royal guard for treason, exposed by Silas's rant. "Well," Genevieve said, her voice dripping with ice as she looked at Sebastian and Bella, "it seems I won't be a duchess after all." But at least the entertainment was memorable. Sebastian stood up, pulling Bella with him. He kept his arm firmly around her waist. He looked at the crowd, at the shocked peers, the gossiping matrons, the judgmental elite. "The ball is over," Sebastian announced, his voice returning to its command. "Get out." The scandal did not die with the arrest of Silas Thorne. It merely changed shape. In the weeks following the Ashworth Christmas ball, the story dominated every newspaper in London. The headlines were vicious. "The Duke's Descent," "Madness at Ashworth Manor," and the most stinging of all, "The Prince and the Pauper, a national disgrace." While Silas was locked away in Bedlam Asylum, raving about stolen birthrights, and Lord Stirling was awaiting trial in the Tower of London for treason, Sebastian and Bella were trapped in a different kind of prison. Society, the very beast Sebastian had tried to tame for years, turned its back on them with brutal efficiency. Invitations stopped arriving. Friends crossed the street to avoid bowing to the Duke. The message was clear. A duke may have a mistress who is a servant, but he must never, ever try to make her his duchess. Ashworth Manor became a fortress of solitude. The snow piled high against the gates, mirroring the icy reception from the outside world. Bella sat in the morning room, staring at a stack of returned letters. She had tried to write to her former governess, the only mother figure she had left, but the letter had been sent back unopened. "They hate me," Bella whispered, her voice hollow. Sebastian, who was pacing by the fire, stopped. He looked tired. The fight with Silas had left him with bruised ribs and a persistent limp, but it was the weight of his decision that sat heaviest on his shoulders. "They don't hate you, Bella," he said softly, coming to kneel beside her chair. "They fear you. You represent a disruption to their order. You remind them that titles and money mean nothing compared to character. I am ruining you, Sebastian," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You heard what the bishop said. He refuses to marry us. He says it would be a mockery of the peerage to wed a woman whose father died a thief." Sebastian's face darkened. "Your father was not a thief. The world believes he was, and as long as that stain is on my name, I am an anchor around your neck." Bella stood up, her hands trembling. Maybe I should leave. Go to France. You could restore your reputation if I was gone." "Bella!" Sebastian's voice was sharp, startling her. He stood up, towering over her, his expression fierce. "If you leave, I follow. I meant what I said on that dance floor. I would sooner burn this title to ash than live a day without you. Let them shun us. Let them rot in their empty ballrooms. I have everything I need right here." He pulled her into an embrace, burying his face in her hair. But Bella felt the tension in him. He was a man of action, and being helpless against the whispers of society was killing him. Just then, the heavy oak doors creaked open. Lady Beatrice wheeled herself in. Since the night of the shooting, the Dowager Duchess had been strangely quiet, observing them with hawk-like intensity. "Enough moping," she barked, wheeling her chair toward the center of the room. "It's pathetic. You look like two wet spaniels." "Aunt Beatrice," Sebastian sighed. "Not today." "Yes, today," she snapped. She reached into the folds of her shawl and pulled out a leather-bound book. It was battered, stained with ink, and smelled of mildew. "Do you know what this is?" Sebastian frowned. "No." When the Royal Guard raided Lord Stirling's townhouse to seize his assets for the treason trial, they found a safe behind a painting, Beatrice said, her eyes gleaming. "My friend in the War Office, General Halloway, owed me a favor for that dance you gave his wife. He smuggled this out for me to see before it went into evidence." Bella stepped forward, a strange sensation prickling her skin. "What is inside?" "Stirling kept records of everything," Beatrice said, handing the book to Bella. "Every bribe, every secret sold to the French, and every pound he embezzled from the crown 5 years ago." Bella's breath hitched. She opened the book with shaking hands. The dates? They matched perfectly with the time her father was accused. "Read page 42, girl," Beatrice commanded. Bella turned the pages. Her eyes scanned the frantic scrawl of Lord Stirling. "October 12th, 1889. The audit is coming. I am short £50,000. I have moved the deficit to the Whitmore accounts. Thomas is too trusting. He signed the ledgers without checking the sub-columns. He will take the fall. I will suggest suicide as his only honorable exit when the time comes." The room spun. Bella clutched the desk to keep from falling. "He knew," she gasped, a sob ripping through her throat. "Stirling stole the money. He framed my father. And then he drove him to his death." Sebastian took the book from her, reading the passage. His face turned a terrifying shade of white. "He murdered him," Sebastian whispered. "Not with a gun, but with a lie." "This is proof," Bella cried, looking up at Sebastian, tears streaming down her face. "It's proof he was innocent." "It is more than proof," Beatrice said with a grim smile. "It is a weapon, and we are going to use it to bring London to its knees." The ledger was a weapon, but wielding it proved more difficult than simply waving a flag. For 3 agonizing weeks, following the discovery of Lord Stirling's private journals, London was a battlefield of whispers and legal bureaucracy. Even with Stirling awaiting trial for treason in the Tower of London, his influence ran deep. His solicitors fought tooth and nail to suppress the evidence regarding the Whitmore embezzlement, claiming the journals were inadmissible, obtained through theft, and the ramblings of a man under duress. Sebastian Thorne did not sleep. He spent his days in the smoke-filled offices of the High Courts and his nights pacing the floors of Ashworth Manor. He leveraged every favour the dukedom possessed. He called upon generals, bishops, and barristers. He threatened to withdraw Ashworth funding from the railway projects. He threatened to resign his commission. He threatened to bring the entire House of Lords to a standstill if the truth about Sir Thomas Whitmore was buried. Bella watched him from the shadows of the library, her heart aching. She saw the toll it took on him, the dark circles under his eyes, the untouched meals. He was fighting a war for a ghost, all for her sake. "It's too much, Sebastian," she told him one rainy Tuesday, placing a hand on his arm as he aggressively tied his cravat in the mirror. They will strip you of your standing if you keep pushing the crown to admit a mistake. Perhaps we should just go away. I don't need a title. I just need you." Sebastian turned, his eyes burning with a terrifying resolve. "It isn't about the title, Bella. It's about the truth. Your father died believing the world thought him a thief. I will not let you walk down the aisle with that shadow over you. I will force them to speak his name with honor, even if I have to drag the Prince of Wales to the pulpit myself." And in the end, that was exactly what he did. Using his connection to Lady Beatrice's friend in the War Office, Sebastian secured a private, off-the-record audience with the prince. He presented the ledger not as legal evidence, but as a moral indictment. He showed the prince the entry where Sterling mocked the Crown's auditors for being easy to deceive. That stung the royal pride more than the theft itself. The wheels of justice, usually rusted and slow, suddenly began to spin with terrifying speed. On a crisp, biting morning in late February, the heavy oak doors of Westminster Abbey were thrown open. The invitation had been issued by the royal household, a command that no member of the peerage dared ignore. The nave was packed. The air was cold, smelling of stone and ancient incense. The same society matrons who had turned their noses up at Bella, the same lords who had crossed the street to avoid the Duke, were now crammed into the pews, shifting uncomfortably in their velvets and furs. Bella stood in the entryway, her legs trembling. She wore a dress of simple white wool, devoid of jewels. She felt small against the towering Gothic arches. "Breathe," Sebastian whispered, standing beside her. He looked magnificent in his full dress uniform, his hand firm on her elbow. "Head high. You are not the one who should be ashamed today." The organ music swelled, a somber, majestic hymn, and they began the long walk down the aisle. Usually, a walk down this aisle was for a wedding or a coronation. Today, it was for an apology. As they passed the rows of onlookers, the silence was deafening. Bella could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. But this time there were no snickers, no whispers behind fans. There was only a heavy, palpable tension. They knew they had been wrong. They reached the altar, where the Lord Chancellor stood, flanked by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The music faded. The Lord Chancellor unrolled a parchment with the royal seal. "My lords, ladies, and subjects of the crown," his voice boomed, echoing off the vaulted ceiling, "we are gathered to correct a grave injustice." Bella gripped Sebastian's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "Evidence has been brought forth," the Chancellor continued, confirming that the financial discrepancies attributed to the late Sir Thomas Whitmore were, in fact, the machinations of Lord Sterling, a traitor to this realm. Sir Thomas served his country with honor, and he died an innocent man. A collective gasp rippled through the Abbey. To hear the Crown admit a mistake was unprecedented. "Therefore," the Chancellor proclaimed, "Her Majesty the Queen hereby posthumously restores Sir Thomas Whitmore to his full rank and dignity. Furthermore, in recognition of the suffering endured by his family, his daughter, Miss Bella Whitmore, is granted the style and title of a baroness in her own right, with all the privileges thereof." Bella felt a sob rise in her throat, hot and sharp. She looked up at the stained glass window, where the winter sun was streaming through in shafts of blue and gold. She imagined her father's face, kind, weary, loving. "They know, Papa," she thought. "The world finally knows." Sebastian squeezed her hand, anchoring her to the earth. She looked at him, and the pride in his eyes was brighter than the sun. He hadn't just saved her life. He had given her back her history. They were married 3 weeks later, in the small private chapel at Ashworth Manor. It was not the grand society wedding Genevieve Sterling had dreamed of. There were no reporters, no throngs of onlookers, no peacocks wandering the lawn. It was intimate, sacred, and quiet. Lady Beatrice sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, muttering about dust in the air. Finch, now the estate manager, after his pardon and rehabilitation, stood as a witness. When Sebastian lifted Bella's veil, his hands were trembling slightly. "My Duchess," he whispered, a promise and a prayer in 2 words. "My Duke," she replied. The kiss they shared was not for the audience. It was deep, slow, and filled with the relief of 2 soldiers who had survived a war. Outside, the first buds of spring were breaking through the snow, signaling the end of the longest winter of their lives. 1 year later. The Christmas ball. The cycle of the seasons turned, and the snow once again fell over Derbyshire. Ashworth Manor was transformed. The gloom that had hung over the estate for years had vanished, replaced by warmth and laughter. The great hall was decked in boughs of holly, ivy, and thousands of white candles. The Christmas ball was back. But the guest list was different. While the high society elite were present, eager to curry favour with the powerful Duke and his vindicated Duchess, Sebastian had also insisted on inviting the tenants, the staff, and the local merchants. It was a gathering of community, not just aristocracy. Sebastian stood at the top of the grand staircase, adjusting his cuffs. He looked down at the swirling crowd, the kaleidoscope of colours, the joy on people's faces. "You look pleased with yourself, Your Grace." He turned to see Bella emerging from the nursery. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of shimmering silver silk that caught the candlelight like freshly fallen snow. Around her neck hung a simple locket, her father's, rather than the heavy Ashworth diamonds. In her arms, she held a small bundle wrapped in blue velvet. "I am pleased," Sebastian said, his voice softening as he looked at his wife and son. "Thomas is finally asleep." "He fought it," Bella laughed, rocking the 3-month-old heir, Thomas Sebastian Thorne. "He has your stubbornness." But he went down eventually. Sebastian reached out, running a finger gently over the baby's soft cheek. "He has your eyes." "Thank God for that." He offered her his arm. "Shall we? The guests are waiting." Bella handed the baby to the waiting nursemaid, kissing the infant's forehead, and took her husband's arm. As they descended the stairs, the orchestra stopped playing. The room went silent. 300 faces turned upward. But unlike the year before, there was no malice. There was only admiration. The Duke and Duchess of Ashworth were the golden couple, the survivors, the proof that love could conquer even the rigid rules of the Victorian age. They reached the centre of the floor. The conductor raised his baton. "Do you remember?" Bella whispered, leaning into him as he took her waist. "Last year you danced with everyone but me." "I was a fool," Sebastian murmured, pulling her close, his hand warm and possessive on her back. "I thought I had to push you away to save you." "And now?" "Now," Sebastian said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made the rest of the room disappear. "I intend to make up for it. I will dance every dance with you, Bella. Tonight, tomorrow, and for the rest of our lives." The music swelled, a sweeping waltz. Sebastian swept her across the floor, spinning her through the golden light. They moved as one, perfectly in sync, surrounded by the applause of a world that had tried to break them and failed. Outside, the snow fell gently on the statues in the garden, covering the scars of the past in a blanket of white. Inside, the Duke held the only woman he had ever desired, and for the first time in the history of Ashworth Manor, everything was exactly as it should be. And that, my friends, is the story of the Duke of Ashworth and the woman who captured his heart against all odds. From the heartbreaking moment he ignored her to save her life, to the final justice of the royal pardon, Sebastian and Bella proved that some bonds are stronger than any scandal. I really hope you enjoyed this long-form historical drama. Writing the twist about the embezzlement and the redemption arc was such a journey. If this story tugged at your heartstrings, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And I have a question for you. If you were in Bella's shoes, could you have forgiven Sebastian for ignoring you at the ball, even if it was to protect you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I have a darker, mystery romance coming next week set in 1920s New York that you won't want to miss. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.